Horse is sold to save a retired cop's farm, but the new owner notices something different about him. Then, one night, the farm's tranquility is shattered, and what the horse does next is unbelievable. The mist gently covered the mountains of Asheville when Michael parked his aged pickup truck in front of Anthony's property. The retired cop waited for him, leaning against the wooden fence, with a look that mixed pride and sadness. By his side, towering and majestic, was Storm, a dark, brown horse who seemed to observe every movement around him with almost human intelligence. "Are you sure about this, Anthony?" Michael asked, noticing the glimmer in his friend's eyes. "Retirement hasn't been easy, Michael. The bills keep piling up, and Storm deserves more than I can offer right now," Anthony replied, stroking the animal's neck. "Besides, I know that with you he will have a good home." Michael cautiously approached the horse, who examined him with deep, attentive eyes. To his surprise, Storm slightly tilted his head, as if approving of him. The farmer couldn't help but smile. There was something special about that animal, something that went beyond its imposing appearance. The transaction was quick but filled with emotion. While Michael prepared the documents and payment, Anthony took the opportunity to have one last moment with his companion of so many years. He whispered farewell words into the horse's ear, and Storm remained extraordinarily still, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. The journey back to the farm was peaceful, with Storm obediently following the trailer. Michael couldn't stop thinking about how his children, Isabella and Caleb, would react when they saw the new member of the family. Marissa, his wife, had already shown some skepticism about the need for another animal on the property, but Michael was convinced that Storm would be a valuable addition. When they arrived at the farm, the reactions were exactly as Michael had predicted. Isabella, at 12 years old, let out a cry of joy upon seeing the majestic animal. Caleb, 2 years younger, stood wide-eyed, his eyes shining with admiration. Marissa watched the scene from the porch, a reluctant smile forming on her lips. "Dad, he's beautiful," exclaimed Isabella, cautiously approaching. Storm turned his attention to the girl, his ears moving gently. "Calm down, sweetheart," warned Michael, but to his surprise the horse showed extraordinary gentleness with the children, lowering his head to allow them to pet him. That first night, as he settled Storm into the stable, Michael noticed something peculiar. The animal didn't fully relax, remaining in a constant state of alert. His ears twitched at the slightest noise, and his eyes continuously scanned the surroundings. "Must be the new environment," Michael murmured to himself, stroking the horse's neck before leaving. But as the days went by, Storm's vigilant behavior did not lessen. Marissa was the first to comment on it during breakfast, a week after the animal's arrival. "Michael, don't you think it's strange? He always seems to be waiting for something." "It's normal, love. He's still adjusting," replied Michael, though a small concern began to form in his mind. What Michael didn't know was that Storm carried with him not only police training, but also a unique understanding of his role as a protector. Every suspicious movement, every unusual sound was recorded and analyzed by the animal, who maintained a silent watch over his new family. The farm's routine gradually adjusted to Storm's presence. During the day, he assisted Michael with the heavier tasks, demonstrating impressive strength and endurance. In the afternoons, after school, Isabella and Caleb took turns brushing his shiny coat and taking him for short walks under their father's supervision. It was during one of those peaceful late afternoons that the first indications something was wrong emerged. Mr. John, a longtime neighbor and family friend, appeared on the property out of breath. His normally serene face was marked by concern. "Michael, we need to talk," he said, casting a meaningful glance at the children playing near the barn. Marissa, sensing the seriousness of the situation, called the children inside, leaving the two men alone. Storm, who was grazing nearby, lifted his head and fixed his attentive eyes on the unfolding conversation. "There have been 3 more thefts this week, Mr. John began, lowering his voice. "This time it was on the farms across the valley. They took tools, some animal. They say it's an organized gang." Michael felt a weight settle in his stomach. The region had always been peaceful, known for its tranquility and the trust among neighbors. The idea that criminals were targeting rural properties was deeply unsettling. "We need to stay alert," continued Mr. John. "They seem to choose more isolated places, far from town." At that moment, as if responding to the conversation, Storm whinnied softly, his hooves tapping restlessly on the ground. Michael looked at the animal, recalling its vigilant behavior since it had arrived. "You know, John," said Michael thoughtfully, "ever since Storm arrived, he's been acting differently, as if he's always on alert." Mr. John observed the horse, for a moment scratching his graying chin. "Maybe he knows something we don't yet, Michael. Animals have a sixth sense for these things." That night, after putting the children to bed, Michael stayed in the stable longer than usual. Storm stood watchful, maintaining his alert posture even in the late hours. The moonlight filtered through the cracks in the roof, casting dancing shadows on the packed dirt floor. "What are you trying to tell us, friend?" murmured Michael, more to himself than to the horse. In response, Storm simply stared at him with his deep eyes, as if carrying a secret he wasn't yet ready to reveal. What Michael didn't know was that in the weeks to come, this secret would unfold in ways that would forever change the lives of everyone on the farm. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from and we'll continue. The first weeks of October brought with them unusual weather for Asheville, colder nights, and a persistent mist that refused to lift even in the afternoons. It was as if nature itself was setting the stage for the events that were about to unfold. Marissa began to notice small changes in the farm's routine. Objects out of place, unfamiliar footprints near the barn, and the most intriguing, Storm seemed more restless during the early hours. His occasional neighs broke the silence of the night, causing her to get up several times to check the windows. "Michael," she called one night, nudging her deeply sleeping husband, "there's something different out there." Michael woke up reluctantly, but the tone of concern in Marissa's voice alerted him. Together, they went to the bedroom window that overlooked the stable. Storm stood still, completely motionless, his ears pointed toward the direction of the forest bordering the property. "Do you see?" whispered Marissa. "He's been doing this every night now." Michael furrowed his brow, observing the animal's stance. It was true that Storm seemed different, more tense, more focused, as if he were on duty, reminiscing about his days as a police horse. The next morning, during breakfast, Isabella brought another piece to the puzzle that was starting to take shape. "Dad, last night I heard voices near the gate," she said, playing with her cereal. "I thought it was you, but when I looked out the window I didn't see anyone." Michael and Marissa exchanged worried glances. Caleb, who had been absorbed in his breakfast until then, looked up with interest. "I also heard something the other day," the boy added, "and Storm got really worked up." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Anthony, Storm's former owner, who had decided to stop by to see how the horse was adjusting. Michael seized the opportunity to inquire about the animal's behavior. "Anthony, is there something you haven't told me about Storm?" asked Michael as they walked toward the stable. The former policeman stopped, his face taking on a serious expression. "Actually, yes. Storm wasn't just an ordinary police horse. He was specially trained for surveillance and protection operations. He has a highly refined instinct for detecting threats." "What kind of threats?" "Anything out of the ordinary. Intruders, people with ill intentions. He can pick up on suspicious behavior patterns long before any human can," explained Anthony, stroking Storm's neck. "During my time in the police, he saved my life more than once." The revelation hit Michael like a bombshell. Suddenly, Storm's vigilant behavior made sense. The horse wasn't just adapting, it was fulfilling its role as a protector. That same afternoon, Mr. John returned to the farm with even more troubling news. 2 other neighbors had reported attempted break-ins on their properties. The criminals seemed to be mapping out the area, studying the routines of the families. "They're getting bolder," warned Mr. John. "We need to organize." Michael spent the rest of the day reinforcing the fences and installing more locks on the gates. Marissa stored valuables in safer places and instructed the children to always stay close to the house. At night, while making his final rounds before turning in, Michael noticed something that made his blood run cold. Near the stable, partially hidden by the vegetation, there were fresh tire tracks. Tracks that didn't belong to any of the family's vehicles. Storm, who accompanied him on the inspection, began to rhythmically paw at the ground. A behavior Anthony had mentioned was a sign of alert. Michael felt a shiver run down his spine as he realized they were being watched. "We need to stay alert, buddy," he murmured to the horse, who responded with a low, determined whinny. The following days were tense. Michael began making regular nighttime rounds, always accompanied by Storm. The horse seemed to have a sixth sense for detecting suspicious movements, guiding Michael to areas that needed special attention. Marissa, in turn, organized a communication system with the nearest neighbors. Any suspicious activity would be immediately reported through a messaging group. The community was coming together against the invisible threat that loomed over them. It was during one of those nights of vigil that Michael discovered just how committed Storm was to his mission of protection. Around 3 in the morning, the horse began to show clear signs of agitation. His movements were precise and deliberate, as if he were tracking something or someone. Michael, following the animal's instincts, noticed shadows moving near the tool shed. There were 3 figures moving silently in the darkness. Before he could react, Storm took the initiative. With a powerful neigh that cut through the night's silence, the horse charged toward the intruders. The sound startled not only the criminals, who fled in a panic, but also woke the entire family and the closest neighbors. Within minutes, the lights of the surrounding houses turned on, and the sound of engines indicated that help was on the way. "That's why you've been so restless all this time," Michael said to Storm while stroking his mane. "You knew they were watching us." The incident that night marked a turning point in the history of the farm and the community. Storm was no longer just a horse. He was a guardian, a protector who had chosen to defend not only his new family but the entire region. The nighttime incident brought about a significant shift in the dynamics of the rural community. The next morning, dozens of neighbors gathered on Michael's porch, bringing coffee, homemade bread, and worried looks. Marissa served everyone as conversations revolved around recent events. "We can't go on like this," declared Mrs. Zeta, a woman who lived alone on the neighboring property. "We need to organize ourselves better." It was then that Mr. Benedict, a respected elder in the region known for his wisdom, suggested something that would change the course of events. What if we created a community patrol, like in the old days, when our parents would come together to protect the land? The idea was met with enthusiasm. Michael, inspired by Storm's actions, proposed dividing the region into sectors, each with its own responsible leaders. The men and women present began to devise strategies, marking surveillance points on an improvised map spread over the kitchen table. While the adults planned, Isabella watched Storm through the window. The horse maintained his proud stance, but something in his behavior had changed. It was as if he knew he was no longer alone in his mission of protection. "Dad," she called, interrupting the meeting. "Storm is acting differently today. He seems calmer." Michael approached the window and observed the animal. Isabella was right. Storm alternated his gaze between the group gathered in the house and the surroundings of the property, as if he approved of the mobilization taking place. The Thai community patrol began operating that very night. Groups of 3 or 4 people took turns in shifts, always accompanied by guard dogs or, in Michael's group, by Storm. The horse demonstrated an impressive ability to guide the patrols, choosing strategic paths and alerting them to any suspicious movement. Marissa, initially concerned about all this activity, began to notice a positive change in the community. Neighbors who barely spoke to each other now shared meals, exchanged information, and supported one another. The children started playing in the backyards again, always under the watchful eyes of the adults and, of course, Storm. One afternoon, while Michael was working in the field with Storm, Anthony appeared unexpectedly. His expression was serious. "Michael, I need to tell you something about Storm that might help," he said, approaching the horse. "During my time in the police, we discovered that he has a unique ability to memorize faces and suspicious behaviors. If he's calmer now, it's probably because he's already identified who our intruders are." The revelation brought a new perspective to the investigations. Michael began paying closer attention to Storm's reactions when different people passed by the property. That's how he noticed something intriguing. The horse showed a particular restlessness when Julian, a young man who had recently started working in the area, appeared. "There's something off about that guy," Michael commented to Marissa one evening. "Storm never stays calm when he's around." Marissa, who always had a good instinct for judging people, agreed. "He asks a lot of questions about the neighboring properties, don't you think?" The suspicion was confirmed when, during one of the nightly patrols, Storm led Michael to a remote area of the property. Hidden among the trees, they found an old cell phone lying on the ground. Upon examining it, they discovered messages revealing an elaborate scheme. Julian was passing information about the farm's routines to a group of criminals in the city. The discovery was a shock to the community, but also a relief. Finally, they had a concrete lead on who was behind the attacks. With the help of Anthony, who still had contacts in the police, they began to devise a strategy to catch the criminals in the act. "Storm will be crucial in this plan," explained Anthony during a secret meeting at Michael's house. "He can help us predict when they plan to strike." And so the small rural community of Asheville prepared to face its greatest challenge. United by the courage of an extraordinary horse and the strength of solidarity, they were determined to restore peace to their land. What they didn't know was that the events that would follow would test not only their courage, but also the bonds they had built. And Storm, the silent guardian, would once again be crucial in protecting those he now considered his family. The month of October was coming to an end when the community decided to put their plan into action. Based on the pattern of previous attacks and the information discovered on the cell phone, they realized that the criminals often acted during new moon nights when the darkness was most intense. Michael, along with Anthony and their closest neighbors, devised a strategy that relied heavily on Storm's sharp instincts. The plan was simple but risky. They would spread the word that several families would be away for a party in town, creating the impression that the properties would be more vulnerable. "Storm will give us the signal," explained Michael during the last planning meeting. "He always knows when something is wrong, long before any of us notices." Marissa, though worried, supported her husband. She took charge of organizing the women of the community at strategic points, all equipped with communication radios borrowed from the local police, who were now aware of the situation. On the chosen night, the darkness seemed denser than usual. The families turned off all the lights in their homes, creating the illusion of empty properties. Only a few strategically placed lanterns maintained the minimal necessary lighting. Storm was especially restless that night. Michael kept him in the stable, but left the door unlocked, allowing the animal to move freely if necessary. Isabella and Caleb were sent to their grandparents' house in town, although they vehemently protested the decision. Around 2 in the morning, the first signal came. Storm began to rhythmically paw the ground in a pattern that Michael knew well. The farmer immediately activated his radio, alerting the others. "They're coming," he whispered into the device. "Storm is signaling." Within minutes, the sound of engines could be heard in the distance. Vehicles were approaching through the farm's back roads, exactly as Storm had predicted weeks earlier with his behavior. The horse remained surprisingly calm, as if understanding the importance of not alerting the intruders prematurely. Michael, hidden near the stable, could see the silhouette of his faithful companion through the cracks in the wood. 3 pickup trucks stopped near the main barn. Hooded men stepped out of the vehicles, moving with a familiarity that confirmed suspicions. They knew the property well, thanks to information from Julian. It was then that something unexpected happened. Among the intruders, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. It was Julian himself, but he wasn't alone. By his side stood an older man whom Michael immediately recognized as Gerald, a respected merchant from the town. Michael's heart raced at the revelation. Gerald was known for buying and selling used farming equipment. Now it all made sense. He was the fence for the stolen goods. At that moment, Storm decided it was time to act. With a powerful neigh that cut through the night silence, the horse pushed open the stable door and charged toward the intruders. The movement was so sudden and precise that it caught the criminals completely off guard. The scene that followed seemed choreographed. While Storm kept the intruders cornered in one direction, members of the community emerged from their hiding spots, blocking all escape routes. The previously positioned lights were turned on simultaneously, illuminating the entire area. "Police! Nobody move!" shouted an authoritative voice. It was the town sheriff who had coordinated the operation with Anthony. The surprise on Gerald's face was evident. He never imagined that a rural community, seemingly so simple, could devise such a sophisticated trap. Julian, on the other hand, seemed more frightened by the presence of Storm than by the police. "That horse, he murmured. "He always knew, didn't he?" Michael approached Storm, who maintained his imposing stance even after the criminals surrendered. "He didn't just know," replied Michael. "He taught us to trust each other again." As the police led the prisoners away, the community began to gather in the farmyard. Hugs were exchanged, tears of relief flowed freely. Marissa ran to embrace Michael, while Storm watched the scene with what seemed to be satisfaction in his intelligent eyes. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from, and let's continue. The dawn brought with it a sense of renewal to Asheville. The news about the gang's capture spread quickly, and soon Michael's farm was filled with curious and grateful visitors. Storm, as always, maintained his vigilant posture, but now, with an air of serenity he hadn't possessed before. Marissa organized a community breakfast on the porch, while the children, who had returned from their grandparents' house, couldn't stop retelling the events of the previous night, each version more elaborate than the last. "Storm is a hero," declared Caleb proudly, offering a carrot to the horse, who accepted the treat with grace. Isabella, more observant, noticed something different in the animal's behavior. "Dad, look how much more relaxed he is now." It was as if he knew his mission had been fulfilled. Michael smiled, recognizing the truth in his daughter's words. The bond between Storm and the family had grown stronger in a way he never thought possible. The horse was no longer just a work animal or a guardian. He had become the beating heart of the farm. In the weeks that followed, the community underwent a remarkable transformation. The fences that once served to separate properties now had gates that allowed easier passage between neighbors. Families began gathering regularly for dinners and celebrations, always with Storm as the guest of honor. Anthony, who visited the farm often, couldn't hide his pride as he saw how his old companion had transformed so many lives. "You know, Michael," he said one quiet afternoon, "when I sold Storm to you, I was afraid I was abandoning a friend. Now I see I was just allowing him to find an even bigger family." The story of Storm and his extraordinary ability to protect began to attract attention from people in other regions. Journalists showed up wanting to do stories, and even a television crew expressed interest in documenting the tale of the horse that had united an entire community. Marissa, initially resistant to all this attention, realized that something bigger was happening. "It's not just about Storm," she explained during an interview. "It's about how an animal taught us the importance of vigilance, unity, and mutual trust." The children in the area began taking riding lessons at the farm, always under Michael's supervision, and with Storm serving as an example for the other horses. The animal showed extraordinary patience with the young learners, as if it understood its role in shaping a new generation. One afternoon, while watching Isabella give her first lesson to younger children, Michael had an idea that would further change the community's destiny. "What if we turned part of the farm into a training center?" he proposed during a dinner with the family and some neighbors. "We could teach not just riding, but also about the importance of community life, caring for animals, and mutual protection." The proposal was met with enthusiasm. Mr. John, who had experience in construction, offered to help with the project for the facilities. Mrs. Zeta volunteered to organize meals for the future students. Each member of the community found a way to contribute. Storm, as if understanding the plans being made, began to display even more sociable behavior. He seemed especially attentive when new visitors arrived at the farm, as if he were assessing who his future students would be. "It's amazing how he can judge people's character," Marissa commented one evening, watching the horse interact with a group of visitors. "It's like he can see directly into their souls." The fall was coming to an end, and with it, a new phase was beginning in the life of the community. The construction of the training center started, transforming an old barn into classrooms and common areas. The farm, which was once just another rural property, was becoming a symbol of unity and renewal. The first anniversary of Storm's arrival at the farm coincided with the inauguration of the Bethlehem Rural Training and Community Center. What began as a simple purchase of a horse had turned into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The inauguration ceremony brought together hundreds of people. Families from all over the region attended, many bringing their own horses to join the celebration. Storm, impeccably groomed by Isabella and Caleb, stood beside Michael, with his characteristic proud posture. Anthony, the guest of honor, couldn't hold back his tears during his speech. "When I retired from the police force and had to sell Storm, I thought I was closing an important chapter of my life. Today, I realize I was only beginning an even more beautiful story." The center quickly became a landmark in the region. Beyond riding lessons, it offered workshops on rural safety, sustainable agriculture courses, and community integration programs. Storm was more than a mascot. He was a silent teacher who, through his presence, imparted valuable lessons about trust, respect, and protection. Marissa, who initially had her reservations about the entire project, now coordinated a special program for children with special needs. It was remarkable to see how Storm behaved differently with each child, adapting to their specific needs. "It's like he can read people," she commented during a session. "He knows exactly when he needs to be gentler or firmer." One afternoon, while observing a class in progress, Michael noticed something extraordinary. A group of new horses recently arrived at the center, which would normally take weeks to adapt, was naturally following Storm's lead. The horse had become not only a protector of humans, but also a guide for his own kind. Isabella, now a confident teenager and a junior instructor, at the center, developed a special bond with Storm that went beyond the typical human-animal relationship. She began documenting her observations of the horse's behavior, creating a manual that would be used to train future instructors. "Every look, every ear movement, every hoofbeat has meaning," she explained to the new students. "Storm has taught us that true communication goes far beyond words." The transformation of the community extended beyond safety concerns. Families began gathering regularly to celebrate achievements, share concerns, and plan for the future. The fear that once kept them isolated had been replaced by an unshakable mutual trust. One particularly special morning, Michael found an envelope in his mailbox. It was a letter from the National Association of Horse Breeders recognizing the work developed at the center and inviting them to share their experience at a national conference. "Look at this," he said to Storm, showing the letter to the horse. "You haven't just changed our lives, but you're inspiring people all across the country." The horse responded with a soft whinny, his attentive eyes fixed on the horizon, as always. Even after all this time, he never abandoned his vigilant nature, but now it was a serene vigilance, born not of fear, but of love and commitment to his expanded family. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, as the community gathered for another of their traditional shared lunches, Michael watched the scene with a full heart. Children playing freely in the fields, neighbors chatting animatedly, horses grazing peacefully, under the gentle evening sun. And at the center of it all, as always, was Storm, the silent guardian who had taught everyone a fundamental lesson: that true strength lies not in the fences we build to protect ourselves, but in the bonds we create to unite us. "You know, my friend," Michael whispered, stroking Storm's neck, "you didn't just save our farm, you showed us the true meaning of community." The horse turned its head slightly towards Michael, its deep eyes reflecting the wisdom that only years of dedication can bring. At that moment, under the blue sky of Asheville, Michael was certain that some stories don't need grand battles or dramatic confrontations to be extraordinary. Sometimes, all we need is a willing heart to protect and a community ready to come together. And so Storm continued its quiet work, day after day, no longer just as a guardian, but as a living symbol that love, trust, and unity are the true forces that protect not only our lands, but also our souls. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from, and we'll keep going.